When I was in the 4th grade, I received a game called Majora's Mask for Christmas. I remember seeing it advertised for a while. I was already in love with its predecessor, Ocarina of Time, so there was much hype going into this game. What I ended up getting was different, to say the least. For starters, it wasn't gray like normal N64 games. The game was gold instead, and had an awesome holographic cover with Link swinging his sword. It was also a large game and required an expansion pack in order to play. There was much hype, and I quickly fell in love with the dark world of Termina, where a moon with a scary face is going to crash into the town and it is up to Link to save the day, and he only has 3 days to do so, but he can also slow down time and reverse it. It was definitely an odd premise, but there was something that intrigued me about the game that I couldn't quite figure out. All I knew was that this game was very different from anything else I've played before it. And I liked it a lot as a kid, and even played through it multiple times. Years passed, and I started to remember this game. And I would think about how odd it was. I just figured if I played it now, it would probably be bad because the game was so different from every other Zelda game. Yet, it still never left my mind. So eventually, I ended up seeing these conspiracy videos about the game online, and some of them even stated that Link was suffering from loss, and that the game represented the 5 stages of grief. Apparently, the story goes, Link starts the game looking for his friend Navi, whom would have been the one he lost and is grieving over. The first stage happens to be the town of Termina. All the townspeople are in denial about the giant evil moon that is headed towards the planet. Then there's the Deku King, who is needlessly thrashing about in anger about his missing daughter. He's so blinded by rage that he blames her disappearance on the little monkey. Then there is Darmani, and despite the fact that he clearly died and became a spooky ghost, poor Darmani tries his hand at bargaining for his return to this mortal coil. Maybe the saddest of all is Lulu's depression that leaves her speechless because she lost her eggs. Next is Acceptance, and many tie this in with the Stone Temple, a place filled with death. The only one alive is Link, as he climbs the tower as though his soul were ascending to a higher plane. Eventually he finds the light arrows, which could be tied to the enlightenment that comes at the end of the 5 stages. I thought about this and I found it very intriguing, and was happy to see people still remembering this game fondly and bringing up how dark and deep the game really was. Well, eventually I decided to replay the game, and it just so happened to be during a time in my life where I too might be going through the 5 stages of grief. It happened to be when I was going through cancer treatment, and at that time, I was thinking a lot about death. Death, I realized, was a major theme of this game, and it blew me away how dark and heartfelt this game was. Everyone Link encounters is battling their own trials and are struggling to come to terms with the inevitability of death, which is represented by the giant moon becoming ever closer. It's an apocalyptic world, almost like a nightmare, where similar characters from the previous game make an appearance, but none of them know Link, making it seem like a very dark dream. The game also immediately drills you in this world of despair where time is very precious and death is constantly becoming closer, just like the moon, moving closer and closer until finally crashing after 3 days, and it's game over. The moon is a perfect metaphor for life, and especially for me at the time realizing how precious any amount of time can be, especially when faced with a terminal illness. The terminal illness I had, I kept picturing as that angry moon that seemed to get angrier the closer it got. Every character in the game seems to be experiencing their own form of grief and despair, whether it's the end of the world approaching or personal. Examples include the swordsman who boasts about being brave enough to slice the moon in half, but during the final hours we see him cowering and admitting that he was powerless against that moon. There's also the postman's dilemma with his schedule, who wants to do his job but is conflicted with the world ending, the Deku butler's son dying and him grieving over it, and the soldiers who were dutiful and going down with the town. One that especially affected me was in Akana Canyon, which involved Pamela and her father. Pamela's father, who is researching Gibdos, which are like zombies or dead things, he becomes cursed and transformed into a Gibdo. Frightened by this, Pamela shoves her father into a closet in their basement and promises to protect him from any further harm. Shortly after this event, the water stops flowing from the spring cave up ahead, causing the Gibdo repel music to stop functioning. The Gibdos from the well begin to start surrounding the house searching for Pamela's father, thinking that he is one of them. Link then plays the Song of Healing, and you get this amazing scene of father and daughter being reunited, while the Song of Time brilliantly plays in the background. It's simple, but very effective. Another touching story involves Darmani, who died trying to save his fellow Gorons that loved and cherished him as a hero, and still do even after his death. And there involves this short but emotional scene that happens right after Link heals him. It teared me up as a kid, and admittedly, it still does. But that's the strength of this incredible game. Let's also not forget the very emotional side quest involving Kathy, which is about two young couples who were about to get married. However, Kathy, the soon-to-be groom, has been turned into a child by the antagonist of the game. What follows is a string of side quests involving Link doing whatever it takes to reunite these two. Kathy eventually meets up with his soon-to-be bride Andrew just before the world ends, just so that they could be together one last time. This story is both extremely tragic and heartfelt, and even as a kid I was affected by this. I ended up waiting to the very last few seconds before reversing time, just so that these two characters could be together just a little longer. It's things like this that you never see in video games. These side quests, which are completely optional, could be missed. Yet there is so much thought and hard work put into these. Almost every character you pass by has this deep story behind them that you'll only know if you take the time to listen to them. But there is a deep layer to everything in this game. It's as if everything in this game is meant to send a powerful message that the player walks away and thinks about this game for years, to come back and be affected by it all over again. As an adult, I understand this game a lot more and what its message is. That every person in this world could have something deep or tragic happening to them, yet you'd never know it. And its depiction of grief and how people deal with it differently. Majora's Mask, at first glance, appears to be an obscure game about a town about to be destroyed by an apocalyptic event, and it is up to the hero to save the day. A closer look, in some perspective, reveals a dark and emotional depiction of grief and death. And to fully understand it, you may have to be going through some of these emotions firsthand. Majora's Mask was a great game when I was a kid, and it's even better years later. Like fine wine, it ages better with time. And Majora's Mask is definitely more than just a game.